Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're diving into the ESTJ personality type.
Hmm.
You brought us some really cool articles from the Spiritual Seek,
Okay.
Portrait of an ESTJ and ESTJ, the director.
Sure.
Kind of like having two different takes on the same personality, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's see if we can figure out what makes ESTJs tick. You know, their strengths and weaknesses, how they approach work, how they approach relationships, and maybe even some fun stuff like famous ESTJs.
Sounds fun.
Right. So one of the things that really stood out to me was how the Spiritual Seek calls ESTJs the guardian. That's kind of a powerful image, right?
Yeah, it is.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it really captures the ESTJ's drive to create order and stability, not just for themselves, but for everyone around them. They're often very protective of their loved ones and their communities.
That protective instinct, I feel like it connects to that whole idea of being
Yeah.
fact-driven and
Yeah.
focused on concrete needs, which both articles mentioned.
Right, absolutely. ESTJs thrive on facts and logic. They're very much grounded in the here and now, and they're less interested in abstract ideas or feelings.
So not really the daydreaming type.
No, not really. They prefer to take action and solve problems.
That probably explains why they often end up in leadership roles.
Exactly. Their natural take-charge attitude, combined with their love of organization, makes them pretty effective leaders. They're good at creating a vision and putting plans into motion.
That makes sense, but the articles also point out that this can have a downside too, right?
Yeah, of course. Sometimes ESTJs can be so focused on efficiency in their own way of doing things that they can become a little bit inflexible or demanding.
Yeah, like overly rigid.
Yeah.
And not really open to feedback,
That's right.
especially if it goes against their way of doing things.
And this is where their introverted sensing function comes in. They really value traditions and proven methods, which can be a great strength, but it can also make them a bit stuck in their ways.
It's kind of a paradox then. They want harmony and order, but that desire can also lead to conflict.
Yeah, I see what you mean. If others don't share their vision or methods.
But it's interesting because the articles also talk about ESTJs being really committed to their community and actually enjoying social events and stuff.
Right.
So how does that all fit in?
Well, ESTJs value structure and tradition.
Yeah.
So they often enjoy social events that have a familiar structure, like family holidays or community service projects.
I see. Places where they can connect with people, but still within a kind of established framework.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's talk a little bit about relationships.
Sure.
The article suggests that ESTJs are loyal and dependable partners, but they might have a little bit of trouble with emotional expression.
Yeah, that's a common observation.
Can you unpack that a bit for us?
Sure. So it really goes back to their dominant and auxiliary functions. Extroverted thinking and introverted sensing.
Okay.
Their focus on logic and practicality means they often show love through actions rather than words.
So more about actions speaking louder than words.
Exactly. They might take care of practical needs or make sure their loved ones are safe and well cared for. But they might not be as comfortable expressing their feelings verbally or being super emotionally supportive.
That makes sense. But how can someone in a relationship with an ESTJ navigate that potential difference in communication styles?
I think patience and understanding are really important. You have to recognize that their way of expressing love might be different. And clear communication is key. If you need more verbal affirmation or emotional support, don't be afraid to express those needs directly.
So don't expect them to just sort of pick up on it.
Right. Give them a chance to understand and adapt.
It sounds like clear communication is really important for ESTJs in general.
It really is. It helps prevent misunderstandings, and it allows them to use their strengths while also working on areas where they might need to grow.
Definitely. Now, speaking of strengths, let's shift gears a bit and talk about careers.
Okay.
It seems like ESTJs are particularly well suited for certain fields.
Absolutely. With their strengths in organization, efficiency, and rule following, they naturally gravitate towards careers that value those traits. Law enforcement, the military management roles.
The article specifically mentioned law enforcement, civic duties, leadership roles.
Exactly. Their sense of duty, their ability to create structure, and their leadership qualities make them very effective in those areas.
Okay, so now for the fun part. Famous ESTJs.
Right.
ESTJ, the director, gave us some interesting examples.
It's always fun to try and see these personality types in action, right?
Totally. So, for instance, Judge Judy, known for her no-nonsense approach, her strict courtroom demeanor.
Classic ESTJ.
Definitely fits the profile. Then there's Lyndon B. Johnson, a former U.S. president known for his strong leadership and commanding personality.
Another great example, his leadership style, his focus on practical solutions, his drive to get things done, all very much in line with the ESTJ personality.
And of course, we can't forget fictional characters,
Right.
like Miranda Bailey from Grey's Anatomy.
Oh, yeah. Her demanding nature, her commitment to excellence, her strict adherence to hospital protocols.
Textbook ESTJ.
Absolutely.
It's really fascinating to see those traits reflected in such different personalities. But before we get too carried away, it's important to remember that these are broad descriptions.
Right.
Not every ESTJ is going to fit the mold perfectly.
Of course not. It's crucial to acknowledge individual variation within any personality type.
So, while these descriptions give us a helpful framework, they're not meant to be taken as absolute rules.
Right. It's a starting point.
So we've covered a lot of ground today. We've gotten a good overview of the ESTJ personality.
We have. Organized, practical, decisive, with a strong sense of duty, but also potentially a little bit rigid. And maybe not the most emotionally expressive.
The fascinating mix.
It is.
But we've mostly focused on how ESTJs interact with the external world. What about their inner world?
That's a great question.
What makes an ESTJ tick? On a deeper level, I think that's something we should explore further.
Yeah, I agree. Let's delve into that a bit more.
Awesome. So in the next part of our deep dive, we're going to look at the ESTJ's inner world.
Okay.
Their motivations, their fears, their desires.
Sounds good.
Stay tuned.
So we've talked about how ESTJs operate out in the world. But now I think it's time to look at what's going on beneath the surface.
Yeah, it's like we've been admiring the beautifully organized bookshelf.
Yeah.
But now we want to open up a few of those books and see what's inside.
Exactly.
And we might be surprised by what we find.
Right.
We often associate ESTJs with being, strong and in control. But like everyone, they have their own vulnerabilities and insecurities.
Absolutely.
So what might some of those hidden struggles be for an ESTJ?
Well, one possibility is a deep-seated fear of failure because they set such high standards for themselves and they're so driven to succeed. Not meeting those expectations can be really tough for them.
That makes sense. Given how much importance they place on order and achievement, any disruption to that must feel really unsettling.
It can.
And because they have such a strong sense of duty and responsibility, they might take on too much.
Yeah.
Which could lead to burnout.
Exactly.
So it's this constant pressure to maintain control and keep everything running smoothly. It sounds exhausting.
It can be.
And you know how we talked about their difficulty with emotional expression?
Right.
That probably plays a role in their inner world too.
Absolutely.
Even though they might not always show it outwardly, those feelings are still there.
Of course.
And suppressing them can take a toll.
It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. You can do it for a while, but eventually it's going to pop up.
Exactly.
For ESTJs, it's crucial to find healthy ways to acknowledge and process those emotions.
It's important to remember that they experience the full range of human emotions, just like anyone else, even if they don't always show it.
Exactly.
So what advice would you give to an ESTJ who might be struggling with these inner conflicts?
Well, I think self-awareness is a great first step. Recognizing their vulnerabilities and acknowledging that it's okay to not be perfect all the time.
So giving themselves permission to be human.
Right. Flaws and all.
And finding healthy ways to process their emotions.
Yes, exactly.
Like journaling or talking to a trusted friend.
Those are good options. Or even seeking professional guidance.
It's also important for them to challenge those rigid beliefs and those perfectionist tendencies that might be creating so much pressure.
I agree. Learning to embrace flexibility.
Yeah.
And accepting that things don't always have to go according to plan.
It's not about abandoning their core values or their drive to succeed. It's about finding a more sustainable and compassionate way to live.
Well said.
And remembering that seeking support is not a weakness. It actually takes a lot of strength and self-awareness to reach out for help when you need it.
I completely agree.
That's such an important message. Now, before we wrap up this deep dive into the ESTJ personality, there's one more area I'd like to touch on.
Okay.
Creativity. It's not something we typically associate with this personality type, given their focus on practicality and logic.
Right.
But I think it's important to remember that they can be creative too.
Absolutely. Their creativity might just express itself in different ways.
So how might that manifest for an ESTJ?
Well, it could come through in their problem-solving abilities, their organizational skills,
Right.
or even their leadership style.
So it's about finding innovative solutions
Yeah.
within established structures and systems.
Exactly.
Like an ESTJ who streamlines a complex process. or designs a highly efficient system, or creates a detailed plan that anticipates every possible contingency.
That's a great example. That's creativity in action.
It's creativity with a focus on order and structure,
Precisely.
and their appreciation for tradition can also fuel their creativity.
Yes. They might find inspiration in historical patterns or time-honored customs.
So while they might not be the ones painting abstract art or writing free-flowing poetry, their creativity manifests in practical and impactful ways. I love that perspective. It challenges the traditional notions of what creativity looks like.
It does.
Well, we've covered so much ground today.
Yeah.
Our listener has gotten a really comprehensive look at the ESTJ personality. Organized, practical, decisive, with a strong sense of duty, but also with some potential challenges around flexibility and emotional expression.
It's been a fascinating journey.
It really has. And I think the key takeaway is that while understanding personality types can be incredibly insightful, it's important to remember that these are just frameworks.
Right.
They're not meant to box anyone in.
I completely agree.
So while the descriptions and insights we've discussed today can be helpful, they're not meant to be taken as absolute truths.
Of course not.
Well, this deep dive has certainly given us a lot to think about.
It has.
Hopefully our listener now has a much richer understanding of the ESTJ personality. But as with any exploration, there's always more to discover.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up, I'd like to leave our listener with one final thought. We've talked about the ESTJ's focus on the external world, their desire to create order and structure. But what about their internal landscape? What are their unspoken fears, their hidden dreams, their deepest desires? These are questions worth pondering as you continue to explore. Not just the ESTJ personality, but any personality type. Because ultimately, it's in those uncharted territories that we discover the richness and complexity of being human.
I love that.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it really is fascinating to think about those deeper layers, those parts of a personality that we don't always see right away.
Right.
And you're right, it applies to understanding all personality types, not just ESTJs.
Absolutely. Personality types are really just a starting point. They can give us some clues about how people approach the world, but the real depth comes from getting to know individuals and appreciating their unique experiences and perspectives.
It's so easy to fall into the trap of stereotypes and assumptions when we talk about personality types. We have to remember that these are just frameworks, not definitive labels.
Yeah.
So while the descriptions and insights we've discussed can be helpful, they're not meant to put anyone in a box.
Exactly. There's always room for individual variation and growth.
This deep dive has given us a lot to think about.
It helps.
We've gone from those initial impressions of ESTJs as the guardian to exploring their strengths and weaknesses, and even delving into their inner world and creative potential.
We've covered a lot of ground.
It's been a really comprehensive journey.
It really has.
And hopefully our listener now has a much richer understanding of the ESTJ personality. They're organized, practical, decisive, driven by a strong sense of duty, but also potentially grappling with challenges around flexibility and expressing their emotions. A fascinating mix of traits.
It is.
And I think one of the most valuable takeaways from all this is that understanding these nuances can help us navigate our interactions with ESTJs more effectively.
I agree. Whether it's in a work setting, a personal relationship, or even just casual encounters, knowing a little bit about their personality can go a long way.
It can help us appreciate their strengths, understand their challenges, and communicate with them in a way that resonates.
Absolutely.
And as we wrap up, I want to circle back to that final thought you left our listener with.
Okay.
What are those hidden depths within an ESTJ? What are their unspoken fears, their dreams, their desires? It's a powerful reminder that there's always more to discover, both in others and in ourselves.
It's a journey of exploration that never really ends.
And that's what makes it so exciting.
Exactly.
So to our listener, we encourage you to keep exploring, keep asking questions, keep delving deeper into the complexities of personality, both your own and those of the people around you. It's in those uncharted territories that we truly discover the richness and beauty of what it means to be human.
Well said.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.